One of the first things that we are unavoidably confronted with when considering non-duality is daily experience, the world we see around us, the stuff outside of our heads. And the contemplation, how real is it? What is it made of? Scientific reductionism would and did have us believe that everything could be broken down into its component pieces until you arrive at some kind of fundamental. So each individual thing can be deconstructed into its component molecules and atoms into subatomic particles and so on. But that's failed us up to now, because everything beyond the Planck scale falls apart. It's not as if everything just ends at the Planck scale. After that, there's nothing. It's just that we don't have the ability to measure anything beyond that. And then, essentially, at the moment, everything beyond that is guesswork. But what we do know is that the reality that we see is not reality. We see only what we're able to see. So if there is an objective reality out there, there's no way I can tell you what it actually looks like. The colours I'm seeing aren't there. My neurology takes the information coming in through my eyes. My brain takes colour and form, shapes, movements, all separately, and patches them all together into a picture, an image, and then projects that image that it's created back into itself to create the image of the world that we see. But that's not the way the world is. When I look at the trees around me, I don't see every individual leaf. I don't see every individual cell in every leaf. I don't see the mechanisms inside the cell. I don't see the mechanisms inside the atoms. My faculties paste all of that together and make a whole that is useful for me as a biological entity to survive in. Donald Hoffman, who's I think he's a cognitive or a clinical psychologist, who wrote A Case Against Reality, would even go one step further and say, you are not able, or evolution has not equipped you to view reality. Evolution has equipped you to survive. And part of survival is not to be able to see reality. That would be not useful to you. It would not give you any gains to be able to see reality. In fact, you're more able to survive if you don't see reality. And so what you're seeing as far as he's concerned, is an interface, like an interface on your computer screen, that works for you and able to make the gains that you need in order to survive, but the interface isn't real. So from the biological perspective, when we look out onto reality, we're seeing an interface, we're seeing a construction that's useful to us, but it's not reality. We know this to be the case. We know that when we look at these trees, when we look at this environment, it's not what it appears to be to us. Our mental faculties like to categorize things. And so when I look around here and I see individual trees standing next to each other on grass, in the air around them, my brain is constructing a useful pattern for me. But I know that these trees aren't individual trees. They're connected to each other via their roots, and even if they're not connected to each other via their roots directly, they're connected through mycelia under the ground. It's one whole organism. The intermittent soil is constantly taking and giving to the trees, to the tree roots. The air around the trees is constantly giving and taking from the trees. So there isn't any individual thing existent by itself, but one continuous process. And you can extrapolate that then out to the ends of the universe, that everything is a one single process, constantly ongoing. And you can extrapolate that right down to the smallest levels, that the process continues all the way down. And just because it stops at the Planck scale, or just because it stops at the end of the observable universe, doesn't mean that the process is not continuing beyond those boundaries. That would be ridiculous. It's just that we don't know where it continues or how it continues beyond those boundaries, but continue it must. So it seems that the conclusion you have to come to is that it's one single complete process that has been ongoing for, who knows? Is it finite? Is it infinite? If it was infinite, would we even be able to find out or know what that would be? Infinity? All we can judge is the small world in which we live. And everything is measured by our brains. So even when scientific reductionism says, well, we can measure those things, and I admire science greatly, but when Sean Carroll says, well, I can tell you something about the real world because I can measure the real world. But you're measuring the real world with your faculties that you've been given biologically. And even if you augment those faculties with instruments, the data you receive is then fed back into your faculties, so is read by you. Your ability to use mathematical constructs to be able to make a judgment on this data is being done by you. So you're always tied to the faculties that you have. And we know that those faculties are physical faculties, or physical capabilities, mental, cognitive capabilities. You know, we have a fair idea of how the neurology of the brain works and the central nervous system. how that interacts with the environment interacts with it in the same way that the tree interacts with the environment and the environment interacts with it. And that seems to be all there is. But if this ongoing process has some fundamental essence, so a fundamental, for want of a better word, substance, that all of this is just permutations thereof, of this fundamental stuff. It would be in everything, from the very smallest to the very largest, including everything in between, so you and me. And the mystics, if you like, would propose that this too is a faculty that you can use, that you can tune into the essence of that process. Its essence is emptiness, from which all things came. Everything is a modulation of that original essence, much like waves on the water. One wave may be a particular field that creates a particular particle, an electron field creating an electron particle. Another wave might be another field creating another particle, but we know that particles are just disturbances in the field. But all of those fields are in the field of water, in the water itself. So there is only one field, and in its natural state of being absolutely still, there would be nothing. But the disturbances in that field create all those other fields, and all of those other particles that seem to emerge from that field and give us the world around us. So literally everything would be an expression of the one. And this original state, the true state, the fundamental state of the one, would be stillness and emptiness. And if that were in everything, then that would be also in you, if it was a fundamental. I suppose this is the idea of consciousness being a fundamental and permeating absolutely everything. In a religious, spiritual context, it would be saying, replace that word with God. God is in everything, or everything is in God. It's not that God is a thing that permeates everything. It's that everything is an expression of that thing and inherently contains that thing. And it's your faculty's inability to see that, or your mental world desiring to see things separately, that makes that not visible to you, that veils the truth. Once you step back from that faculty and intuit the fundamental property, you can realize that property is stillness and peace and oneness. You unveil the world as it actually is. You unveil reality as it actually is.